In the 1990s, I took my grandfather to visit his elder sister. When talking about old times and looking at old photographs, my grandfather and his sister suddenly started talking about an incident at the end of the Great War where my great uncle had got killed in an accident in the Woolwich barracks. Their reminiscences follow.
We got a family around Woolwich way somewhere. Oh. Mother's, my mother's
Walter's
brother.
He was buried at Woolwich, Walter was.
Yeah.
And the man that he went down to see him was buried at Plumstead. I went to the funerals because I went up there when he was killed. He went through all the wars, the 1914 war, and then come home and worked at Woolwich Arsenal. And that's where he was killed.
Well,
he went through the wall without a scratch.
There was one man working down in the manhole.
Yeah.
And I don't know which is which. Whether it's Uncle Walter working down the manhole.
No, this other man, and Walter went down to try to help him.
Yeah.
And they both died.
Well, what killed him then?
With gas.
Oh, what?
Gas in the
gas
manhole.
and stuff in the old
something like that.
manholes.
That's a Woolwich Arsenal, that was. And as you
They
say,
wouldn't let us see him. Well, I didn't see him, because I was only gal, was I? I wasn't very old. Mother couldn't go up to Woolwich, so I went.
But it was, what we call it, gas? It was asphyxiating gas, it wasn't?
I don't know what it was,
Yes,
really, but he was... You couldn't recognise him, they said.
I heard...
Snuff and me, and Aunt Anna and Uncle Bob all went up to the funeral. And when Snuff went out of Walter's backyard, you know, into the open, there was a woman lived just opposite, and she thought that was Walter, and she screamed and ran in. You know, because he was like him.
Yes, yes.
To look at, I suppose.
He'd done full time in the
army.
And he'd been all through the war.
Yes, he'd been everywhere. And
all over the world, yeah.
And then come home.
Then when he came home, he was working at Woolwich Arsenal. Had he been there a couple of months?
He hadn't been long.
Very, very short time. And one went to rescue the other down a manhole, and they both brought up dead.
And he was buried at... I lived at Welling. That was a sort of an estate with old huts. You know, they were huts, they weren't houses.
Common, I think. You've got right up, the common is up the top. That's between Woolwich and Plumstead.
Yes.
They were prefabs.
Yeah.
Not prefabs of this war, but the prefabs of the 1914-18 war.
Yeah.
All up on Woolwich Common there somewhere. I went up there.
Yes.
Me and the Nan, your Nan, went up there once. See
20 years later, I once again was listening to these recordings and decided that something like this really ought to be in the newspaper archives. I took myself off to the local Woolwich Library paper archives and looked up the records. After a bit of fussing about, I came across the coroner's report, and I'll read that for you now. The coroner's inquiry into the Woolwich sewer tragedy was held by Dr. Whitehouse at Woolwich on Monday last. The deceased men are William Thomas Russell, general labourer at 62 Stapley Road, Belvedere, and Walter Smith, 38, bricklayer of 216 Snowdrop Road, East Wickham, Welling. Evidence of identification was first given by the widows. Thomas Welch, QMS RE, said that he was foreman of the Incidental Repairs Department at Cambridge Barracks. On Tuesday the 10th, he noticed a peculiar smell in the barracks. It had not been reported to him before. He went to the lowest part of the drainage system and detected the place where the smell came from. It was decided to flush the drainage system next day. On the morning of the 11th, this was done. Were you visited by the Assistant Divisional Officer? Yes, by Captain Knox. How did you get on? After dinner, I took a box respirator for the men to use in case the fumes were too strong. How long have you been at the barracks? Since May 1919. Have you had any trouble with the drain or manhole system before? No, sir. Is the drain ventilated? Yes, sir. The whole system is ventilated. Where is the nearest ventilating point? About 70 to 80 yards from that manhole. Was the drain completely blocked at this manhole? No. Is there a good fall between that manhole and the next manhole? Yes. Can you account for the gas if the drain is properly ventilated? No. Did you expect gas? Yes. Then did you take precautions? Yes, after lunch I took an ordinary military box respirator. Had you any oxygen about? No. And then? The manhole was ventilated until 3:10 p.m. At that point, I heard Russell, who was standing at the top of the manhole on the ground level, say, "It's all clear." Immediately afterwards, witnesses heard an exclamation and saw Russell trying to get clear of the manhole, but fell back. How did he get into the manhole? I don't know. What did you do then? Smith went into the manhole and attempted to bring Russell up. Witnesses then saw Smith's eyes roll and clutched hold of him. Knowing he could not hold for very long, he shouted to Sergeant Sullivan, who was passing for help. By opening his mouth, he let in the gas, and was forced to release his hold. Sergeant Morgan put on the box respirator and descended the manhole. He succeeded in getting Russell out. On going down the second time to get Smith, he found that the latter had disappeared under water. Sergeant Morgan had come out, and Sergeant Sullivan put on the box respirator. The latter brought him to the top 3 times, but the gas was too strong for him to get him out completely. Sergeant Morgan and Sergeant Sullivan tried artificial respiration on Russell. The coroner: had any instructions been given to these men not to enter the manhole? Yes, sir, I told them not to. Why do you think Russell went down? The only thing I can suggest is he was overzealous. He was a good workman. Did you know that Russell had had 10 years' experience at that kind of work? Yes. Sergeant William James Morgan, RFA, was called by Sergeant Sullivan. He saw the 2 deceased men lying at the bottom of the manhole. There was a permanent ladder there, and the witness went down. Smith, in the meantime, had disappeared under the water. The gas mask did not fit, and the witness was overcome by the gas and had to come up. Sergeant Sullivan went down and was also overcome, and the witness assisted him out. Sergeant William Sullivan, RGA, said that when he got to the manhole, the deceased men were submerged by water, except their heads. He went down, but had to let go his hold on Smith and get out as fast as he could. 3 times he went down, and the last time he got him to the top, when his, Smith's, clothes tore and he dropped. I could not do much more, for I was done, said the witness. Captain James Knox, SRES, said that he gave his approval to the flushing of the manholes to get rid of the smell. In his opinion, the smell was caused by the draining operations at Mulgrave Pond, Artillery Place. The smell synchronised with the opening of the drainage valve there. Captain Weston RE produced plans, etc., and in reply to Mr. Stanton for the Borough Council, said that he would do his best to get proper precautions taken to get rid of the smell if they were necessary to drain the pond in the future. Lieutenant William Gardner, RAMC, said that death in both cases was due to asphyxiation from sewer gas poisoning. The coroner, addressing Mrs. Russell, said, "There is no doubt that your husband was overzealous in going down this manhole. He was evidently a man keen at his work and anxious to get through it, and lost his life through that." To Mrs. Smith, Dr. Whitehouse said, "Your husband attempted to save the life of Russell, and no doubt did a very, very plucky actions indeed. You will probably never forget the way in which he lost his life, in an exceedingly plucky way." Sergeant Morgan and Sullivan and QMS Welch were then called forward. To them the coroner said, "I wish to compliment you all very much on the way in which you went down the sewer in attempting to save the lives of the deceased men. It was undoubtedly a very plucky action, and it is to be regretted that you were not able to get them up in time. I hope the Divisional Officer, Royal Engineers, will put your name forward for recognition by the War Office. Sympathy with the widows and appreciation of the efforts of the free men were tendered by the representatives of the War Office and Borough Council. The coroner added, as regards the case generally, this drainage is entirely a War Department matter. The sewer is defective, like those in the majority of barracks in the country. They are a constant source of anxiety, and with a large number of men living in the barracks and situated in a congested part of London, there is not the slightest doubt that these drains want completely overhauling. I hope that the military authorities and the Woolwich Borough Council will take the matter up. There should be no doubt whatever that these drains are in a perfect condition. The matter of the Arsenal Pond should also be considered. Gas should not be allowed to be pent up. The antediluvian drainage system going through these barracks wants completely overhauling, and I hope it will be done.
The codicil to this story is the funeral, which was in the following week's newspaper. I'll read excerpts from the report of the funeral. Lou Smith is actually mentioned as attending the funeral. The two victims of the sewer fatality at the Cambridge Barracks, Woolwich, took place during the week. The remains of William Thomas Russell were interred on Wednesday afternoon in Erith Cemetery with military honours. The funeral of Walter Smith of 216 Snowdrop Road, East Wickham, Welling, took place on Tuesday afternoon at Plumstead Cemetery. The mourners were the widow, brothers Robert and Alfred of Rattlesden, Suffolk, Mrs. Birch and Mrs. Rose, sisters, of Ipswich, Mrs. Ada Smith, sister, Chelsea, Miss Louise Smith, niece of Rattlesden, Suffolk, Mrs. Elizabeth and Alice Knight, nieces from North Woolwich, Mr. and Mrs. Knight, Ballstall Lane, father-in-law and mother-in-law of deceased, etc. 6 of the deceased workmates carried the coffin from the church to his last resting place. A number of beautiful wreaths were sent by numerous relatives and friends, including one from his fellow workmates at the Cambridge Barracks. Mrs. Smith desires to thank all who have been so kind to her in this trying time and asks all to accept this as an expression of gratitude to all.